Good afternoon and welcome. I'm so glad Miss Granada's brought you in today. She has told me that you are studying the Civil War and that you already know that slavery was one of the major issues in the war. I would like to share with you a story today that has something to do with the Underground Railroad. Now, many of you know that wasn't really a railroad, but it was a system of pathways that slaves sought freedom, escaping from the South to the North. During the mid-1800s, there were between 60,000 and 100,000 people that were able to escape. Many did it by horseback or hiding in carts, and most did it by walking and then hiding in barns and under the floors of houses. It was a very scary time, and it was a tragic time in our history, the way we treated people. Today, I'm going to read to you Henry's Freedom Box by Ellen Levine. And this young man found a different way to escape to the North. Henry Brown wasn't sure how old he was. He was a slave, and slaves were not allowed to know their birthday. Henry and his brothers and sisters worked in the big house where the master lived. Henry's master had been good to Henry and his family, but Henry's mother knew that things could change. Do you see those leaves blowing on the wind? They are torn from the trees, like slave children are torn from their families. One morning, the master called for Henry and his mother. They climbed the wide staircase, and the master lay in the bed with his head stuck up above the quilt. He was very ill. He beckoned them to come closer. Some slaves were freed by their owners. Henry's heartbeat was fast. Maybe his master would set him free. But the master said, "You're a good worker, Henry. I am giving you to my son. You must obey him and never tell a lie." Henry nodded, but he didn't say thank you. That would have been a lie. Later that day, Henry watched a bird soar above the trees. Free bird, happy bird, Henry thought. Henry said goodbye to his family. He looked across the field. The leaves swirled in the wind. Henry worked in his new master's factory. He was good at his job. "Do not tear that tobacco leaf," the boss yelled at the new boy, and he poked the boy with a stick. If you made a mistake, the boss could beat you. Henry was very lonely. One day he met Nancy, who was shopping for her mistress. They walked and talked and agreed to meet again. Henry felt like singing, but slaves didn't dare sing in the streets, so he hummed all the way home. Months later, Henry asked Nancy to be his wife. When both of their masters agreed, Henry and Nancy were married. Soon there was a little baby, and then another and another. Henry knew that they were very lucky. They lived together, even though they had different masters. But Nancy was worried. Her master had lost a great deal of money. "I'm afraid he will sell our children," she said. Henry sat very still. Henry worked hard all morning. He tried to forget what Nancy said. His friend James came into the factory and he whispered to Henry, "Your wife and children were just sold at the slave market." "No," cried Henry. He couldn't move. He couldn't think. He couldn't work. "Twist that tobacco," the boss poked Henry. Henry twisted tobacco leaves, and his heart twisted in his chest. At lunchtime, Henry rushed to the center of town, and a large group of slaves were tied together. The owners shouted at them. Henry looked for his family. "Father! Father!" Henry watched his children disappear down the road. Where was Nancy? He saw her the same moment she saw him. When he wiped away his tears, Nancy was gone. Henry no longer sang. He couldn't hum. He went to work, and at night he ate supper and went to bed. Henry tried to think of all the happy times, but all he could see were the carts carrying away the ones that he loved. Henry knew he would never see his family again. Many weeks passed. One morning Henry heard singing. A little bird flew out of a tree into the open sky, and Henry thought about being free. But how? As he lifted a crate, he knew the answer. He asked James and Dr. Smith to help him. Dr. Smith was a white man who thought slavery was wrong. They met early the next day in an empty warehouse. Henry arrived with a box. "I will mail myself to a place where there are no slaves," he said. James stared at the box and then at Henry. "What if you cough and someone can hear you?" "I will cover my mouth and hope," Henry said. Dr. Smith wrote on the box, "To William H. Johnson, Arch Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania." Henry would be delivered to friends in Philadelphia. Then he printed on the crate in big letters, "This side up with care." Henry needed an excuse to stay home or the work boss would think that he had run off. James pointed to Henry's sore finger, but Henry knew that that injury wasn't bad enough. He opened a bottle of oil of vitriol. "No!" cried James. Henry poured it on his hand, and it burned his skin to the bone. Now the boss would have to let him stay home. Dr. Smith bandaged Henry's hand, and they arranged to meet the next morning at 4 o'clock. The sun was not yet up when Henry climbed into the box. "Ready?" he said. James nailed down the lid. Dr. Smith and James drove to the station. The railway clerk tipped the box over and nailed a paper to the bottom. Dr. Smith begged the clerks, "Be careful," but they didn't listen. They threw the box into the baggage car. Hours passed, and Henry was lifted up and thrown again, upside down, no less. He heard waves splashing. This must be the steamboat headed to Washington, D.C. The ship rode smoothly, but Henry was still upside down. Blood rushed to his head. His face got hot. His eyes ached. He thought his head would burst. He was afraid to move. Someone might hear him. "I'm tired of standing," someone said. "Why don't we move that box and sit on it?" said another. Henry held his breath. Could they be talking about his box? Henry was pushed. The box scraped the deck. Now he was on his right side, now on his left, and suddenly right side up. "What do you think is in here?" the first man said. "Mail, I guess," said the other. "I am mail," thought Henry, "just not the kind they think." Henry was carried off the steamboat and placed in a railroad car, this time head up. He fell asleep to the rattling song of train wheels. He awoke to loud knocking. "Henry, are you all right in there?" "All right," he answered. The cover was pried open. Henry stretched and stood up. 4 men smiled at him. "Welcome to Philadelphia." At last Henry had a birthday. March 30th, 1849, his first day of freedom. And from that day on, he also had a middle name. Everyone called him Henry Fox Brown. You can imagine how desperate you would feel to have freedom, to find a way of life where you experience dignity and respect. I am glad slavery is over, but there's still a lot to do to protect the rights of all people. Thank you for coming.